This morning I'm at the Crazy Horse Trail in Ottawa's Carp Hills. I've come to talk about spring ephemerals, otherwise known as spring wildflowers, and particularly the spring wildflower known as trout lily. My name is Nick Stowe. I'm an ecologist, and this is the ecology of the Ottawa Valley. Every organism has what we call its niche. Its niche is really the circumstances, the timing, the adaptation that allows that organism to acquire the resources it needs. And there's a principle, a phenomenon called niche differentiation, in which organisms that occur in roughly the same space use different tactics to acquire their the nutrition, the energy, the water that they need to grow and to reproduce. It may be a difference in the timing of their growth. It may be a difference in the where they grow. It might be in how rapidly they acquire nutrients, how fast they grow, or their ability to tolerate low nutrient conditions and grow very, very slowly. But the overall purpose is of the adaptation of each species niche is to let it survive in what otherwise would be a highly competitive environment. The spring ephemerals, like this trout lily, have evolved to grow and reproduce early in the spring when a lot of light still reaches the forest floor. That way they can avoid the intense competition for light that occurs later in the summer or later in the spring and summer when the forest trees have fully leafed out. You can see the tree canopy above me. Today is May 6th, and these trees are just beginning to leaf out. You can see how much light is already reaching the forest floor, even though it is early in the morning. Later in the day, when the sun is more overhead, even more light will reach this forest floor. One of the consequences of niche differentiation is very high efficiency in the utilization of resources in ecosystems such as this. Early in the spring, there is a large flush of nutrients through the forest ecosystem. We have this thick duff of leaf litter down on the forest floor that's in the process of decomposing. We have warming temperatures, we have moisture that allow decomposers to start getting into woody debris like this. And so there's an enormous release of nutrients first thing in the spring, and that occurs when these trees here really aren't in a a good state to utilize all of those nutrients. These are just leafing out, as I've already said. They're in the process of mobilizing the nutrients that they stored in their root systems the previous autumn. They haven't really begun to put out the fine roots that will then forage along in the forest topsoil for nutrients later in the spring and in the summer. And so this flush of nutrients could easily be lost from this ecosystem if it was not for the phenomenon of niche differentiation. The fact that we have this thick blanket of trout lily on the forest floor, along with these ferns, other spring ephemerals, some of these very, very young seedlings. If we didn't have these growing during this time period, a lot of those nutrients would be lost. It strikes me as very, very cool that individual adaptations, that the evolution of individual adaptations actually works to create a more efficient ecosystem. Even though there is no intent there. It just happens that because of that principle of niche differentiation, each species seeking a way to maximize its own portion of the resources, that it makes this whole system much more efficient. One of the cool facts about trout lily is that it reproduces primarily asexually. The plant can, in effect, clone itself. It can send up shoots around itself, which will grow into new separate plants. And that is why we get these very dense carpets of trout lily. You can see the characteristic mottled leaves here on the floor. Many of these individual plants will never flower. And many of them, most of them perhaps, are genetically identical, having arisen from the same original plant. But the plant does produce these beautiful flowers, which are pollinated by bees and other insects in the spring. And then trout lily has a special relationship with the ants that occupy this forest floor. It is an ant-dispersed species. The individual seeds have a capsule that is high in carbohydrates and fats and other nutrients required by ants, and so the ants will harvest the seeds of trout lilies, take them into their dens, into their burrows, and consume the capsules, leaving the seed buried underground to later germinate and grow in the following spring. I hope you've enjoyed this introduction to the spring ephemerals, and I hope that you'll join me next time.